Okay, this is a story that has sent absolute shockwaves across the globe. I mean, think about it. A sitting head of state seized from his own presidential compound by foreign special forces. It's unprecedented. So let's break down what exactly happened with Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, this quote from the BBC's South America correspondent really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? She says, "This is an extraordinary moment." And the pictures, wow, they're just staggering. You have this man who held such a tight grip on power for so many years, and now he just looks completely powerless. It's something you have to see to believe. So you're probably asking, how did this even happen? Well, from what we know, it was a really swift special forces operation right at the presidential compound in Caracas. And it wasn't just President Maduro they seized, his wife, Celia Flores, was taken as well. And just like that, they were flown out of the country and straight into U.S. custody. Okay, so once he was in custody, this is where the story gets even more surreal. The way he was transferred, it wasn't some secret, hidden operation. No, the journey to a New York courthouse was a full-blown, carefully documented spectacle. First, you've got this armored convoy rolling through the streets of New York. Then, you see the actual images of Maduro and his wife in prison outfits, in handcuffs, being walked to a helicopter. They're then flown right over the city to Manhattan, where the federal courthouse is on lockdown. I mean, it is an absolutely wild sight, a world leader being treated like any other criminal suspect, right on U.S. soil. So that brings us to the big question. Why? Why was he taken in the first place? Well, it all comes down to a case that's been waiting for him in a New York federal court. And the charges against both Maduro and his wife are incredibly serious. We're talking a whole laundry list of drug and weapons offenses. The next step for them is to face a judge and enter their pleas in a formal arraignment. But this whole situation brings up a massive legal question, one that pretty much everything else hinges on. Can a sitting head of state actually be put on trial by another country? This is a huge deal for international law, and it sets the stage for a major legal battle. Okay, so this slide breaks down the two completely opposing arguments. On one hand, Maduro's defense is going to argue for what's called sovereign immunity. That's this long-standing idea that you can't prosecute a sitting head of state in another country. Simple enough, right? But, and this is the whole point, the U.S. position is that he doesn't have that immunity. Why? Well, because after that disputed 2018 election, the U.S. and a ton of other countries officially stopped recognizing him as Venezuela's legitimate president. So the entire case, literally everything, boils down to one single question. In the eyes of this U.S. court, is Nicolas Maduro a president, or is he just a private citizen? So while this huge legal drama is playing out in New York, you have to wonder, what's going on back in Venezuela? Let's shift our focus over to the streets of Caracas, because there's a pretty big power vacuum that's now being filled. You know, if you were just walking around Caracas, on the surface, things might seem kind of normal. It's a working day, businesses are open, traffic is moving, but you can feel the tension. Key streets around the Parliament building totally closed off. That's a huge sign that a major political shift is happening behind the scenes. And stepping into that power vacuum is Delcy Rodriguez. She was Maduro's vice president, and now the Supreme Court has designated her to be sworn in as the interim president. What's absolutely critical here is that she has the backing of the military and key ministers. That support is everything for keeping things stable during this transition. But for the average person in Venezuela, all this high-stakes political drama might feel a world away from their daily reality. You know, a reporter spoke to a 49-year-old woman in Caracas, and she said, "Food prices are extremely high. It's terrifying." And that really grounds you. It's a powerful reminder of the deep economic crisis that's the backdrop for this entire story. Now, as you can probably imagine, an event this huge didn't just happen in a vacuum. The reaction from around the world was swift, it was sharp, and it really shows you the deep geopolitical divides that exist. So let's break down how different countries are reacting. On one side, you've got Maduro's allies, like China and Iran. They're calling this a violation of international law and are demanding his immediate release. No surprise there. But in Europe, things get a lot more complicated. In the UK, you have one minister calling Maduro an evil dictator, while the prime minister is calling for a peaceful transition. Spain is totally split down the middle. The government condemns it, but the opposition is actually cheering it on. And then you have Switzerland, which jumped in with some serious financial action. They've frozen all assets held by Maduro and his associates. A real mixed bag of reaction.
All right. Finally, let's talk about the ripple effect. What are the immediate, real-world consequences of this? How is it already shaking up the financial and economic landscape?
Here's a perfect, immediate example for you. Chevron, it's the only major U.S. oil company still working in Venezuela, saw its share price jump more than 7% in pre-market trading. So why the sudden jump? Well, investors are basically betting that a new leader in Venezuela could mean U.S. companies get much better access to the country's huge oil reserves. And speaking of money, that Swiss asset freeze, the scale of it is just immense. A report from 2021 found bank accounts holding something like $10 billion. And that money is believed to be public funds that were embezzled from Venezuela. So the goal for the Swiss government is to make sure that if these funds were illegal, they can one day be returned to the people of Venezuela. So at the end of the day, we're left with this really powerful and complicated question. On the one hand, is this an evil dictator, as that British minister put it, finally facing justice? Or, on the other hand, does seizing a foreign leader, no matter what you think of him, set a really dangerous new precedent for international law? That's the big question the whole world is trying to figure out right